Imagine you're a young 12-year-old girl and you've just learned that your mother is going to spend the rest of her life in prison. What goes through your mind when your sense of security is ripped away? Today, my guest, Angel McDonald, shares what it was like growing up carrying the stigma, the uncertainty, and the loss that came with having an incarcerated parent, and how faith, forgiveness, and resilience helped her create a future far different from what anyone would have anticipated. Angel is currently the executive director of Mother's Refuge, where she serves homeless, pregnant, and parenting young mothers and their children. Her story is one of healing, redemption, and discovering that your past does not have to define your future. Welcome, Angel.
Thank you very much.
First, let's get our listeners caught up. Over the past 2 episodes of Her Next Chapter, we had an in-depth conversation with Judy Henderson, who was wrongfully convicted and sentenced to life in prison before being released after 36 years of incarceration. Today, we are joined by Judy's daughter, Angel. Angel will share with us what those years were like from the other side of the prison walls and how Judy's sentence impacted the family that she was forced to leave behind. So today we're going to start with the day that everything changed. Angel, let's start where your story begins. What do you remember most about your mother going to prison and what you learned that day?
Well, my mom and dad had a very abusive relationship. And so I had prayed that they would divorce so that would end. And that I could live with my mom and everything would be great. And she was my person, And so I had my mother had moved to Springfield, Missouri, and my dad lived in the house I grew up in Independence, Missouri. And I had came back to visit my dad and went to church camp with a friend of mine. And when I came home from church camp, my dad sat me down, and told me that I wouldn't be going back to my mom, that me and my brother were going to come back to his house and stay and live there. And he really didn't explain a whole lot. So a part of me was devastated because of my mom. Another part of me was relieved because at 12 years old, we moved to a place where I didn't know anybody. And I had grown up in a home where I had a very good support system with friends. I, knew everybody was popular, and a really close-knit group of neighbors and stuff. And so I really was thankful that I was getting to come back to them.
Right.
On one hand, and on the other hand, I couldn't even comprehend what it meant to not have my mom in my life in that role, hands-on role. And I didn't know at that time that it was going to be 36 years, obviously. And he didn't explain anything other than something had happened and she wasn't able to be around, and this is the way it was. And so it was very confusing.
So did he tell you that she was going to prison, or she just wasn't going to be around?
No, and at that time, so when the murder happened, which was 45 years ago, she, her and her boyfriend at the time had fled. And they were gone until December. So it was in July that my dad told me that I wouldn't be going back home to my mom and that I'd be staying there. And so he really didn't elaborate and tell me anything other than I was moving back to the house I grew up in.
So at that point, they were just on the run.
Yeah.
So you just knew she was gone. So then at what point, after they were caught and then, trial and all that time.
Yeah.
You're not aware of any of that. Is that right?
Correct. And I didn't know what had happened. I knew it couldn't have been good. And then in December, when they had been caught, My dad's family lived in Springfield, Missouri. So we always went down there for the holidays. So we were traveling back to Springfield. And that's when he actually told me what had happened. Was
Wow.
our way to Springfield to celebrate Christmas.
Yeah.
And because he didn't want me to hear about it on the news or
Right, because
anything.
it was all over the news.
Yeah. And so that's when I found out that a murder had happened and that they were prosecuting her. But he told me that she was innocent and that she, he felt like she would be coming home, eventually, but not now.
Right.
And so I actually did see her in jail at that time. And it was really, really hard. I didn't understand anything, obviously. And it was Christmas. There's a lot going on. And so It wasn't until her trial, which was many months later, that we went back to Springfield. My dad took me back down there. They all went to trial, and I actually went to her tanning salon that she still owned and was with a worker of hers. And so when I was there and I knew they were going to come up with, the verdict or whatever that day, I called a radio station and I asked them if they would play the song Endless Love. I don't know if you remember that song.
Oh, yeah, sure.
For my mom, Judy Henderson. And their response was, "What? Who?" And I said, "Judy Henderson." And they were like, "Oh, that's your mom?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so then the very next thing that came on the radio was not the song. It was that she had been convicted of murder.
And so you're listening to the radio thinking you're going to have this song, A Pledge of Love to Your Mom.
Yeah, which is crazy. How ironic is it that song, I called them.
Well, and how just devastated you must have been.
It was really, really hard. I remember just crying and breaking down. And the lady that was working, for her that day, we closed the tanning salon down, and she didn't live very far. We went to her house until my family could come and pick me up.
Yeah.
And it was devastating, to be.
And she was convicted for life at the time.
Yeah.
And so you're old enough at 13 at that time to understand what that means.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was very, very distraught. I remember that day, obviously it's etched in my mind. I went to my grandma's house afterwards, and me and my grandma, her mother, are very, very close. Like, my life models hers in many, many ways. And I know I'm living in her prayers, is what I always like to say.
I love
and
it. Yeah.
Thankful for those. But I remember going to bed that night and my grandma in my room asking to pray for me, with me. And I was so mad at God. I was like, how could there be a God if he took away my mom, and I remember my grandma telling me that, sometimes we don't understand things because God's ways are higher than ours, but that he's there and he's with us, and that he would never leave us, and he'll make a way where there seems to be no way. And so, she prayed over me, which is something I learned from her. I didn't realize it obviously at that time, but she's like, "You don't have to pray. I'm going to pray over you." And so she prayed over me, and, and I felt a calmness and stuff. The hurt was still there, obviously. And and just the confusion of what my life was going to look like, after that.
Well, it's just amazing how, because for your grandmother, this was happening to her daughter. Yeah. And, knowing how devastating that must have been for her, and then seeing you in so much pain, the fact that she didn't question her faith as a faith-filled woman, and then was able to use that to guide you.
Yeah.
is so powerful. I mean, you did such a great job describing that. I can just visualize her praying over you and the sense of peace
Yeah.
that came with that, knowing, because once that security of your mother being torn from you.
Yeah.
And but so your grandmother was there, and it sounds like your dad was helpful in supporting your mom and getting you back and forth, to Springfield, and so you could be around that support system. But did you ultimately go back to Independence and live with your dad?
Yes, I did. And I had such a strong tie, for all the years. My mom's the firstborn of 9 children, well, 8 and 1 stepchild. And then I was the firstborn, on that grandchild. And so I was extremely close. My grandma always said I was like her youngest child. And I was like, I'm your grandkid. We don't do what the kids do. We get breaks on stuff, but so my dad allowed me to continue that close relationship where my grandma would take me to go visit my mom and stuff like that. But when I go down to Springfield, since his family lived there, I always went to my grandma's house, my mom's house, and I'm very, very close to them. And I wasn't really to my dad's side of the family.
Sure.
He honored that, but my brother wasn't, because he was so young. So he stayed with my dad, and I went with my grandma.
And your brother is how many years younger than you?
9 years younger than me.
Okay, yeah. So he was little.
Yeah.
So he didn't go to prison and visit her until he was older, 16.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, he went when he was little a few times, but not very often. He doesn't remember it at all, and he doesn't remember her at all.
So what was it like visiting her?
I think back when she first went to prison, it was a co-ed prison, and it was very, very different than what it is now.
Yeah.
And you were able to be a lot more freer and do a lot of stuff. So like our whole family would go, my aunts and uncles, and I even brought my best friend with me one time.
Oh, wow.
That we're still best of friends since we were 5 years old. So, I mean, and her mom also would take me. She was friends with my mom, would take me to see my mom sometimes as well. But it was really, it was scary. I didn't,
Right.
It made me really sad when I would leave, because I knew that I wasn't going to get to see her, and I didn't get to talk to her all the time. The phone calls were collect. So, she would call my house, and my dad would let me talk to her and stuff, but it wasn't like we could just talk endlessly and I could pick up the phone and call her or whatever.
Right.
And stuff. So there was a lot of rules.
She tells the story of when you broke up with a boyfriend or something, and she said she cried, harder than she thinks you were crying, and just, still tried to, still felt the pain that your children feel, even, separated by so much.
It was really crazy, because I say this, and it's so true, that it was like she had this sixth sense. And whenever anything huge happened in my life, she called, and I would be like, you're kidding me. I mean, and some things that I wouldn't really want to tell my mom, but she'd call, and I'd be like, all right, I guess I'm going to tell her, so like, I'm talking like big, huge moments in your life.
Sure.
And so she always, did. I think, I know it was God had his hand in it.
Right.
And so I was able to have that a different relationship. I say that it was probably even closer than a lot of people that have their mom living in their home. because I was able to tell her things that I wouldn't have told her had she lived with me, because one, I would have got grounded on a lot of them. And two, I knew she, her and my dad didn't really talk. So she was safe to tell that, things
Right.
to and to talk about. And then she really did give me good, solid advice, and she listened, and it made our relationship so much stronger. I knew that she couldn't be there, but I could see my friends and stuff and their relationships with their parents. And I missed being able to go shopping with her and to go home to her and stuff like that. But I always felt like, but I have something that's really special that I might have lost that, but God gave me this amazing relationship that I could share anything with my mom and know that she loved me unconditionally.
Well, and I think when you know your time is limited, even if just limited on a phone call, you make the best use of that time and of the words that you choose and the tone that you have and the things that you say to each other, and you've got that limited time. And so the quality you spent with her, as you said, was probably so different than what your girlfriends had with their moms, because you just take for granted that they're there all the time and that they're going to be there when you get home. And when you don't have that, you have to capture those moments that you do get to interact with her.
Yeah. Well, and I would watch them and I'd see them fight with their moms, which teenagers do. I fought with my dad. So I wasn't this, a perfect teenager by any means, but I remember not having my mom thinking, oh, be nice to your mom. Like, you don't know how precious that is,
Right.
and what a gift it is and stuff. So I learned to really value relationships, I think, in a different way.
Sure.
And try to make the most out of them and cherish the time that we do have.
Amazing. Now, you talk a little bit about your friends. What was it like going to school? You've got the events where moms show up or are involved in Girl Scouts or whatever's going on. Was it, and at that stage, people are divorced and widowed and not everybody's got a mom there. Did you just blend in like that, or was there some type of stigma because your mom was in prison?
Yeah. Well, what really helped me was that I had such a good, stable friendship circle before that happened.
Okay.
Because we lived in the same house from the time I was 5 till I was in my 20s.
People that had known you for forever.
Yeah. And my parents were friends with their parents. And then at school, I was very social. And so I had a really good, strong network of friends. And so it was funny because in high school, which is where you would think like ridicule and stuff like that might happen, nobody ever was like that. Excuse me. To me, they were always very kind, and it really wasn't an issue because teenagers are thinking about their own teenage stuff, I think, too.
Yeah.
And my best friend, Michelle, at the time, like I said, we're still best of friends. We talked a lot about it, but I didn't really talk a lot about it to a lot of people. It was just something that I processed with my best friend, with my grandma, and I kind of probably just shoved it down a lot and figured this is just the way it is. I can't change it, so I just have to live each day as if, this is the hand that we're dealt and this is what we're going to do. And I knew my mom was fighting to be released, and she never gave that up. And that was probably the hardest, is because every year I would believe that year she was going to come home.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually it was around Christmas time, I would find out that she wasn't coming home.
Yeah.
So Christmases were kind of hard a lot of times. It had the good in it that we all enjoy, but it also had the heartbreak, until 36 years later. But But yeah, it was actually when I got out of high school and started in my 20s and stuff like that, and started being around people that didn't know me growing up, that I actually quit telling anybody who
Really?
my mom was. Yeah, I didn't, even my bestest, closest friends, I didn't tell them that my mom was in prison. I just said, "Oh, I'm going to go visit my mom," and they
Yeah.
thought it, later they told me when they did find out that they thought it was really odd how she never visited me. And I
Oh,
never really talked about where she, like all the normal stuff you would talk about, like, oh, my mom's going here, my mom's going there. I just
right.
would go visit her. And it wasn't until I was working at Mother's Refuge and I had to do a missions trip. And I won a missions trip through found a grant that I had written,
Uh-huh.
and they gave away a missions trip by drawing a name out of the hat, and it happened to be mine. And so when we went over there, we talked to kids about HIV and helped them. We were there for 3 weeks, but we had to share a lot of our personal stuff. And it really changed my heart. And I thought, if I can share my personal stuff with people, I can share about my mom. And I realized during that it was his story, not my story, that it was God's story and his testimony of what he's done in my life.
Uh-huh.
So when I came back, I just started telling everybody.
Really?
Yeah. And people, like I never wanted, and the reason I didn't tell people was because I didn't want them to feel sorry for me
Mm-hmm.
or think badly of my mom.
Right.
Because
Right.
I never, and I didn't want to think,
It's too hard to handle that narrative. You don't know what they're going to say when you're not around, or what conclusions they're going to jump to without all the details. And and there's also that line where sometimes it's just nobody's business anyway.
yeah, it was
And
so hard to talk about, and then they want
you're
to know
probably
details.
tired of talking about it.
Yeah, and I want to know details and stuff like that. And I'm like, I didn't even want to know details. I just
Mm-hmm.
knew the basics, and I knew what happened, and I believed my mom was innocent, and I believed that she would come home. But it wasn't until I started actually telling people about what happened that I actually started breaking free of bondage I didn't even realize I had been under, like,
Right.
and you know how when you keep something hidden and it comes out in some way,
Right.
and I was probably very rebellious, like had walls up of protection because I couldn't trust people. And I always thought, I'm going to be one step ahead. I'm not going to let them hurt me, and stuff like that. I saw what, I thought men had done to my mom, and I wasn't going to let that happen to me. And
So it was because of the abuse that your mom suffered that you were protective, or was it because you were victimized when they took your mom away?
yeah,
Right.
I think it was both. And I think, just seeing how she trusted men in her life, and how she had trusted, and how she'd been failed by them, how she'd been failed by the system, like, who can you trust? I knew I could trust my grandma, and the certain people, my best friend Michelle, certain people that were in my life, but just people in general, I held at an arm's length, and I had a lot of friends, but I had very few that were privy to my personal,
Sure. Well, and it's not an experience that your friends have all gone through.
yeah,
It's not relatable to the average person. And back then, therapy wasn't a daily thing for,
no,
now it's the first step where certain
yeah.
situations dictate a visit to a therapist. And, back then it wasn't that readily available, right?
Right. Well, even like when my mom and dad were married, I remember a time where, or several times when they had physical altercations, been in physical altercations, and my mom would be hurt, and the police would come, and the police would tell my dad, go have a drink, cool off, come back later. Like, that was the advice back then. And I'd be like, are you joking? Like, you need to do something. Like, this continues to happen. She's going to die, and stuff. So there was a lot of probably mistrust that I grew up under. And so it really was broken off when I went on that missions trip to South Africa.
So for you think that was the turning point where you were able to accept what had happened, but not let it define you.
Yeah. And decide, like, you know what? My story isn't my story. Like, it's like God didn't allow me to walk through it so I could keep it in and not share it, but he gave it to me and trusted me with it so that I could share it, so that I could help other people, in learning how to hope when it seems hopeless, or you know what I mean, or being able to love again, or trust, or forgive. People, like my dad used to say that I was forgiving to a fault, because he was very quick to forgive. And I always have been. And I didn't understand it when I was younger. Now that I've walked in my faith and have grown really close to the Lord, I understand that forgiveness is for a gift to us, to keep us out of bondage. But I always was able to forgive very quickly when people would hurt me. I might keep it at arm's length, but I didn't hold a grudge or think vengeful thoughts.
Who did you feel that you needed to forgive? Or who were you angry with that needed this forgiveness?
Well, a first person I forgave was my mom's boyfriend, at the time. And I knew I had to forgive him because that was for God. And my grandma really kind of helped me through that. Like, that is for God to do, not me, And if I held on to that, actually, as I'm thinking back about it, she really, truly did walk me through that. If I held on to it, it just hurt me and ate at me, so that we had to pray for him, which I'm like, what? Why would I pray for him? Like, look what he's done to our family. But she told me that's what God would do, and that, his ways are higher. We don't understand them, but this is what we do. And so I felt like I had to forgive him. I forgave, my dad and my mom for the relationship that they had, that was so abusive, to one another, that led to her leaving and, all that stuff. And it was funny because I wasn't ever mad at my mom. I really, I was sad, very, very sad. I probably took it out more on my dad because he was there, and able to, and I wasn't like mean spirited to him. Just, I wish my mom was here. My mom would do this different, things like that.
Sure.
And that I'm sure was hurtful to him because he was trying the best that he could with what he had.
Right.
But it wasn't until my mother came home that I had to walk through forgiveness with her,
Yeah.
And
let's come to that soon. But when you walk through the forgiveness of just your parents for the situation, I always say sometimes you're not angry at the person, you're just angry at the situation, or that this even happened, without pointing fingers and blaming someone. But for our listeners who are going through holding on to that anger, holding on to that resentment, what does it feel like once you're able to truly forgive?
It is so freeing. It really is. I realized that it helped open my eyes that sometimes two people aren't meant to be together necessarily. They're, like oil and water, and
Sure.
they don't mix well. But the two people separate are okay. They're good people. They can be good people in a bad situation, And so when I was able to see that my dad is, he has good qualities. He's a good person and can be happy with somebody else.
Sure.
And my mom's a good person and can be happy, with somebody else or alone, whatever. And I can love both of them, and stuff like that. And when I learned that even the best of people mess up, we all make mistakes. I've made a million mistakes, and thank God that people don't hold you to your worst mistake. That's, I mean, they look at you and they see good in you. And it really helps to be able to see that, what, most people are doing the best they can with what they have.
Mm-hmm.
And I can love my dad. I don't have a relationship with him right now, and haven't on and off my whole life, after that. But I still love him, and stuff. I don't have to agree with what he did or how he did it. And the same with my mom. I can love her. I don't have to agree with choices that she made or didn't make, but I can still love them. And once you do that, it takes you to another place where you can see people through the eyes of Jesus, I think, a lot easier, which I know that sounds like, okay, what does that look like? But to see that people are people, they're hurt people, and they do the best that they can with what they know. And sometimes you do have to put up boundaries for yourself, and that's okay. And then sometimes you can separate the two, where it's like, okay, that is you, and you get to walk through that, but it doesn't mean I have to walk through that. And I don't even have to walk through it with you. I can just love you and pray for you,
Uh-huh. And I love the comment about boundaries. Boundary conversations seem to be very popular these days. And I was talking to a relative about it recently, and trying to determine, healthy boundaries. But I like the comment that I can walk with you, but you don't have to be the one in the middle of it. And it doesn't have to consume your life. And you can love the person and you can be with them, but you can still have, some type of boundary. But that doesn't mean you have to cut yourself off from them. Or you just have to do what's healthy for the whole relationship.
Right. And I think I probably learned that with my mom being in prison, because I was in a prison, obviously, without my mother, and stuff like that.
Your own kind of prison.
And a sentence, affected me. But at the same time, I wasn't actually the one going to count at 5 a.m. or, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So I think that was a process of learning that, okay, you don't have to be in the middle of it. Your life can still go on. And you can love that person and support them. And I always look at it like this, like, people come in your life and they leave your life, and I welcome you to be in my life if we're going to have a healthy relationship. But if not, your life's going to go on and mine's going to go on, and I know that kind of can sound harsh, but it's also very freeing when you're, I'm not with my husband because I need him and I have to have him. I'm with him because I love him and he's good to me and I'm good to him, and it's healthy.
Well, and you choose to be there at that time because it is good for you and it's good for him and it's a healthy relationship.
Yeah. But if it wasn't, we wouldn't be,
Right. Because you've learned, it doesn't do anybody any good.
No.
To hang on to the past if it's not healthy and if it's not negative, and if it's negative. Exactly. So that kind of feeds into, on this show, we often talk about, saying goodbye and putting closure to the past when we're going through any type of transition. And it sounds like it was, in your 20s or so when you really kind of flipped into that, hey, I've got to put some closure to this past, and I'm not going to have the childhood I thought I was going to have, and I'm not going to have the parents that I thought I was going to have, and things are going to look different. And then you kind of move into this stage of transformation, right? What did it look like for you as you're learning all of this about yourself?
I think one of the things that helped me learn it the most is having children of my own. And I was in a bad relationship with their father, and it was very, it was abusive and all the things. And I remember, I loved my children. Like, I was like, this is an opportunity to do things different, to be different. And I didn't know exactly what that looked like because I hadn't had it in my life, but I knew I wanted it, and I wanted it for them. And so I remember they were very, very young, like 2 and 3 years old. And their dad and I had gotten into a fight, and they were there and they were crying, and he left, and my mom called, of course.
Right at the moment.
And I was crying, and I'll never forget this. It really changed my life. It was the turning point that she said, I guess your kids are going to go through the same thing you did. And I was like, oh, heck no. No. And so that day I was like, you have to leave. We're not doing this anymore. And I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to make it with 2 kids. And, without my dad didn't talk to me. My mom wasn't there. My grandma had dementia, so I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. And that really was a turning point in my life, and to where I went back to college. I lived in South Carolina. I moved back to Missouri, got a job at Mother's Refuge, and I was hired at $7 an hour for 10 hours a week, didn't have a title, and went back to college to get my degree, got a nice duplex. And I always tell our moms, you want to live someplace that you're proud to live in, that. And so I got a good place. I got a new car, and I just started making changes to where I was not going to be in an abusive relationship, not going to, make the same choices I had made in the past, that my mom had made in the past, that my grandma had made in the past, and I was and it was very foreign, and it didn't happen overnight. It was continually okay, I didn't make that decision right, but you know what? I'm going to make it different next time, and really being accountable to myself and looking at where my life was headed and what I was doing and how I was doing it, and showing up for my kids and for myself, every single day. And it was just step by step. It was super hard, but I look back now and I'm like, I don't even know how I made it. I remember the place I lived, the lady was like, I don't know how this is going to work, but I feel like I should let you, move in here. And when I got married, when I graduated college and got married, right after one another. And when I did, she bought me a present, was like, hey, I hope it works, but if it doesn't, you can rent from me anytime. I was never, ever late. I had no money, but I always paid on time, and stuff like that. And I feel like whenever you start going, everything wasn't perfect. There were lots of times I had just a few cents in my bank account. And through the whole time, I was visiting my mom in prison with 2 little kids,
Right.
And I didn't have a dad that was there. I didn't have, a mom that was, living, with me or down the road or whatever and stuff. So I'm not saying it's not easy, but I do know that when you put your mind to it, it's amazing the things that you can do. I have to remind myself sometimes when I think, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to do that? I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that. God just helps you, and he opens the door, and you just take one step. It's one step at a time,
I love that advice. And I love the fact that through all of these challenging transitions, you never ever once felt sorry for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, even when you say, these are all the things I didn't have, but certainly having those children and having the will and the motivation and the faith and just the opportunity. I mean, God bless that woman that listened to her intuition to let you live there and in a place you felt proud of and a job that you believed in that aligned with your faith. And,
and it's so funny.
Kind of just start to line up and you don't even realize it.
Well, and even like at Mother's Refuge, like I applied for the job. I was like, okay, I need to do things different. And I felt like I should apply at Mother's Refuge. And I applied and I thought it went really great. And I got a letter of denial. And I was like, okay, God, well, I thought I was supposed to do that, but I guess I'll just keep looking. And it wasn't within a week that my old boss and mentor, Robert, gave me a call and was like, hey, I really wanted to hire you, but I kind of promised the job to somebody else. She didn't show up and I was really happy. Are you still interested?
Wow.
And so, and he was like, he's passed on now, but he was like a brother to me and his family I love and adore. And I wouldn't be where I'm at today had God not brought him in my life, because him and his family really showed me what it is to love the Lord and walk with him. My grandma did too, but you know what I mean? Just really poured into me and stuff and taught me the stuff I do today.
Well, and I think sometimes when you do something for someone else or working in an organization that's focused on helping other people who need some help, it takes the spotlight off of you. You don't have time to worry about your own drama. You're focused on the mission of the organization. Tell us a little bit about Mother's Refuge.
So Mother's Refuge is a home for pregnant and parenting young moms, and they can come anytime before their pregnancy and stay up to 2 years, their child's third birthday, actually, in our maternity home. And that's ages 12 to 21. And then we have a transitional living program where they can move into and stay an additional 3 years in an apartment. And they have to work, and they save 70% of their income, which they get back at when they leave our program, or if they need it to pay off bills and stuff like that, buy a car. And then we have an aftercare program that if you've ever been at Mother's Refuge, even for a day, we say you're part of our forever family. And so we have activities every month that just bless them, that our community, wraps around them, helps them at Christmas time, back to school, and stuff like that, just so we can be that support system that, is so crucial. Like the support system I had, it wasn't necessarily just my family. It was people outside of my family that showed me that I could do it and be who I could be. And I knew that if you can do it, then I could do it. And so I always tell them, if I can do it, you can do it. I had to work hard. It didn't come natural. It didn't come easy, but
how is it funded?
Through grants and personal donations from, people, businesses. And then we also have funding from the government, just grants and stuff like that. We take in, moms sometimes that are in children's division, but just a few of those.
So if somebody wanted to look further into the organization and perhaps support it, or was in need of the services, where do they reach you, or where do they reach Mother's Refuge?
Yeah, so they could go to mothersrefuge.org or give us a call, 816-353-8070. And if they want to come and take a tour to see what we're about, like we love to show people what we do, because our home is a home where you and I would live,
And you're just outside of Kansas City?
Yeah, in Independence. And it's very nice, because I want them to have dignity. And the home that we're building a transitional living program, 12 apartments right now, right across the street from President Truman's home.
Okay.
And that's
Wow.
Independence, and the apartments are going to be so amazing. And I'm so happy because our moms deserve like the best. So
Yes.
it's super
And that gets them and their children off to a great start, which is so important.
Yeah.
So speaking of the relationship with the mother and the children, tell us what it was like when your mom came home 36 years later.
Yeah. So, I had prayed all the time that my mom was going to come home. And I would tell everybody, my mom, the people that knew, and then later more people, my mom's coming home, my mom's coming home. And they'd be like, and kind of look at you like, yeah, okay. And not really believe. And I'm like, no, she is.
So, believed enough for everybody.
Yeah, like having that faith. And so when I got that call from the governor's office that if I could meet them up at the prison, it was a moment that I had prayed for, for 36 years and believed, like really truly stood on faith that no matter what happened, no matter what it looked like in our natural eyes, that it was going to happen and I was going to see it, witness it. And so I told Governor Greitens because he came to the prison to release her, and he went to each and every single person that was there in our family and apologized for what we had gone through.
Wow.
Yeah. And I told him, I was like, this is the best day of my life. Like it was the best, most amazing day because whenever you pray for something and then to see it actually come to pass,
right.
It's like, and I knew it was only God, like nobody ever does that. No governor had ever done that. And prior to him doing it, and he says this when he gives talks, there was like a cemetery that had been vandalized that he had put out a message to have people come and help him clean up. Mm-hmm. And I was actually going to go to try to see him that day down in, Jeff City. And I got that email that morning and was like, what? He's going to be at the cemetery in St. Louis instead. And I called my boss at the time. I was like, hey, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go here instead and try to see him. And so he was like, okay, definitely go try to see him. And when I went there, the vice president was there, so you can get anywhere near him. And I was like, oh God, I'm so sorry. I should be here to help, not, try to have my own agenda. And so I went in there, cleaned up the cemetery. And when I was walking out, I saw a group of people and I turned around and I looked, I was like, what's going on? And he had stayed behind and he was in the middle of this group of people. And I was like, okay, here we go. And I walked over there and I thought, how am I ever going to get to him? And I am not joking. It was like the parting of the Red Sea. I would take a step and people would move out of my way. And I'd take another step and people would move out of my way until I was like face to face with him. And I looked up and he looked down and I reached out my hand and I said, my name's Angel McDonald. My mother's Judy Henderson. She's in prison for a murder she didn't commit and we need your help. Can you help us? And somebody tried to interrupt and he's like, wait just 1 second, please. And he turned back to me and he said, I'll look at it when I get back to my office. And I was like, thank you. And he's like, you want a picture? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so he took a picture and he says that really impacted him. And he went back and pulled the file and changed how they looked at clemencies.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's unbelievable.
So that's a really cool story. I didn't want to miss telling that because
that's a great story. And how much he did for you and for your family when so many others that your mom and all of you reached out to, weren't able to or didn't. And, one person can change your whole life.
Yeah, absolutely. And and having the faith and stepping out. I mean, that was not my comfort zone, right? to
Yep.
go show up by myself, clean up some cemetery, and then do that. And then how one courageous act from him has totally changed the trajectory of our family,
Yep.
which he's still very much a part of our family, and so kind to my mom. And it's just, I'm very grateful. She could have came home a million different ways, and I wish she would have been able to come home a lot sooner. But I know that she did a lot of great things while she was incarcerated and helped so many people. And I know that that's our story, and it is what it is, and I'm grateful that we survived it
Right.
and
And you
stuff.
two have built a beautiful relationship as adult women now.
Yeah. And it was crazy because everybody always asked me, like, what's it going to be like when she comes home? And I'm like, oh, it's going to be great. We're going to go do this and we're going to go do that. And literally, the right before she was released is when I stepped into the executive director role at Mother's Refuge. And I was like, welcome home. I have to work like 70 hours a week now. So it was a lot different than what it always is. So much different than what we
Sure.
imagined. And we pictured things like, oh, okay, if this happens, my life's going to be so much better. It's going to be great. And there was still so many challenges. I've learned now that it's just different.
Yeah.
It's
But it's also a lot of normal things. Like
yeah.
had a phone call with her not too long ago, and it was going to, grandchildren's birthday parties and,
Yes.
very normal family things that we all hopefully get to do.
Oh my gosh, it is so. That is one of the greatest things, and I'm very protective over holidays and birthdays and stuff. I mean, if she even starts to say, oh, I don't know, I might go with a friend, I'm like, oh, heck no, you're coming with me. I've
Yeah.
waited 36 years and I'm not sharing you on these days. And she's so great, to me. She is such a wonderful mother. I couldn't ask for a better mother and a more supportive mother. And it, like I said, when she came home, that was when it was so easy. It's so easy to talk to somebody on the phone and tell them everything, that when you're not really going to be living life with them.
And you don't have to see their face, their reaction.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when she came home, it was like all different. She was there all the time. And then, it was like, do I tell her this? Do I not tell her that?
Right.
And then you also see, excuse me, I always saw my mom as like the strongest person ever, and then to see her she was a person. She had vulnerabilities, she had weaknesses, she had flaws, and, and stuff like that, like we all do. And so coming to realize that she's a person just like I am. And she's not, you tend to put people who passed away or something like that on this pedestal. And so it was really eye-opening to me to see that people are people. And it was one of those forgiveness moments where it's like, it's okay to not be perfect or not have it all together or have weak moments. When I first watched her tell her story and saw her be so hurt, that was the first time that I'd ever seen her, as weak, so to speak, which is just a normal part that we go through, we have weaknesses. Right. And it was so hard to see that part of her. And so and then to hear her, like when she wrote her book, she would say things and I was like, that is not how that happened. Like, I don't know what she's saying. She's making stuff up, And I thought, what is going on? And I wouldn't even read the book at first. And she would be like, "Can you help me?" And I'm like, "No, I can't do that. It's too hard for me." And she respected it. She's so good to me. She was like, "It's okay. I understand." And then, hold on. And then right before her book release, I decided I need to know what I'm standing with and for. And so I was like, "Mom, I need to read that book." And so she's like, "Oh, okay." And she gave it to me. Excuse me. And so when she did, I went home, I got a notebook, and I was going to write down everything I disagreed with so we could talk about it. And I didn't even start reading till like midnight. And I started reading it, and I just started crying. And my notebook was 10 pages full of things that inspired me, that just made me, I just wouldn't cry. That made me love her even more. And then I was like so thankful. And I thought that's just like the enemy to try to keep us from our greatest blessings. That here I was afraid of what it would say. And what it was a gift, that many people don't get. Many, parents don't write down all that stuff and pass it on. And I'm like, here, I got to see how she felt. And I was looking at it in the eyes of a 13 or 12-year-old little girl that was like, "What do you mean things were good? This was terrible," And it was just because I was 12 and she was not,
Right.
So,
well, the book is called When the Light Finds Us by Judy Henderson. And I've read it a couple times, and I've got highlights everywhere.
Yes.
There are so many great little phrases that you want to take with you and stick in your back pocket. Just learning lessons from her story. I mean, she really is a beautiful woman, and really did some amazing positive work. When she was in prison there. The word, when I hear your story and your mom's, the word that just keeps coming to me is grace. I feel like you've approached all of this with such grace. Your relationship with both your mom and your dad, that was so difficult growing up, but yet you still push forward, and going and seeing your mom, and when you had trouble in your own relationship and having to leave and start all over. But I just feel like you're filled with so much grace and beauty, and the story just comes together with that.
Thank you. She taught me so many wonderful things about strength and about faith and about forgiveness, and about how to love, beyond.
Well, and that's how you heal, right?
Yeah.
I feel like, through that faith and forgiveness and the support that you had from everybody, that's what makes it possible to heal.
Yeah.
And, for the people that don't have that, what else do you suggest they turn to?
To God first and foremost. I mean, I think that it wasn't until my mom said that, and I really started turning more to God and my faith instead of trying to do it on my own ability, because I just screwed things up because I was just doing what I knew, and what I saw. And I always tell my kids, I'm like, don't ask somebody who has a broken relationship and is in a broken relationship how to have a good relationship, right? Ask somebody who's in a good relationship how to have a good relationship. And so it was like, once I quit depending on my experiences and myself, and started turning to God and being like, I don't understand this, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to do it, but I know I have to do it different. And it was one step at a time. And then really evaluating the people that are in your life and what they do in life. Because honestly, I know it's really hard to let people go, but sometimes you have to let them go, not only for you, but for them as well, and then knowing that you can do the hard stuff. It doesn't, you don't do it overnight, but it's just one step at a time, doing the right thing, one one day at a time.
Yes.
Yeah, I wrote down my goals, but I always realized that, hey, it's what I do today that's going to affect tomorrow and the next day. And like I said, I'm living in my grandma's prayers. So I think prayer is so important for people, and that it's really the most important thing we can do. And we always think of it as the least important sometimes, or the last resort. And it really, I've learned it should be the first thing that we're like, I don't get this, I don't understand it, but I have faith and I trust, and, help open the doors that need to be open and close the doors that need to be closed, and help me to know the difference,
Yes. Well, Angel, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story, being so vulnerable and open and honest. I know that you have touched lives through your journey, but also through this podcast. I know there are people listening that may not have walked the path that you've taken, but they're going to receive inspiration from your story and from how you survived your story and the healing that you were able to do. I am so grateful to have you on this podcast, and I am such an admirer of yours.
Oh, thank you.
So,
thank you very much.
And to our listeners, thank you so much. We appreciate it. I encourage you to take a look at mothersrefuge.org and be sure to read When the Light Finds Us to learn more about Judy and Angel's story. This is Karen Maurer, and we will see you next time on Her Next Chapter.